Historically, it's been the heavyweights that have dominated the cruiser market in America. For the beginner cruiser category, it's been the Honda Rebel. The 2021 Honda Rebel 300 now sees its competition with the Royal Enfield Meteor 350. We're here in LA to talk about the positives and the negatives of both these motorcycles and see how they compare. All right, so we're back in the garage after a couple days of testing. Beside me here is Senior Editor Morgan Gales, and we have the 2021 Honda Rebel 300 ABS beside Morgan, and the 2021 Royal Enfield Meteor 350 beside myself. So let's get started with the engine here. For the Royal Enfield Meteor 350, we have a 349cc air and oil cooled single cylinder. And for the Rebel 300, we have a 286cc liquid cooled single cylinder.
And while displacement is comparable, engine size is comparable, they have very, very different character.
Yeah.
The Meteor revs up a lot more slowly. It doesn't rev as high, whereas the liquid cooled Honda here is just much more responsive and has a lot more to give.
Yeah, you definitely are just on a mellow cruiser with the Royal Enfield for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it does have that trademark Enfield thump that you get, but the Royal Enfield, it'll hit red line before 7,000 RPM. The Honda here revs over 10,000. So you really see that peak horsepower of 25 coming in at that later RPM mark, and it makes using the full rev more exciting. Yeah,
and with the Enfield, we have 17.86 horsepower, so that's quite a bit less considering that this is a 349 and that's a 286.
Yeah, and a lot of that can be attributed to the compression ratio. You know, you're looking at a 9.5 to 1 compression ratio on the Enfield and a 10.7 on the Rebel here.
And then in terms of torque, we actually have more on the Royal Enfield. We have 18.21 pound-feet of torque. And the Honda has 17.59.
Right, and you see that peak torque on the Enfield come right about 2,000 RPM, so it's really right off of idle.
Right away.
Whereas the Rebel here, it's much higher. So you see it slowly climb to peak torque and to peak horsepower. So you really, again, you find yourself using much more of that range, whereas the Enfield, you're shifting quickly to try to keep yourself closer to that peak torque in those lower revs.
Yeah, and also we ran it on the quarter mile, and the Royal Enfield had 18.77 seconds and the Honda had 16.54 to the quarter mile. So it's 2 seconds faster than the Royal Enfield. I mean, that's not a crazy difference, but it is a difference. So now on to suspension. Both of them have very comparable suspension, 41 millimeter forks and dual shocks in the rear. And they also have very different characteristics on the road. We have the Rebel 300 that's a lot firmer than the softer, bouncier suspension of the Meteor 350.
Yeah, and it really did sort of fit the character that had already been defined by these bikes. The Rebel feels more taut. It is comfortable being pushed and it's comfortable being ridden hard, but when you're on the highway, there's a little bit too much of the highway surface being transmitted to your hands. You get a little bit too much of the bumps.
I felt it in the pegs too. So, but with the Royal Enfield, it's very, very smooth
Buttery smooth.
Yeah, and
but
stable
then,
feeling on the freeways.
When you're trying to carry through some turns with haste, you do get the bounces.
Yeah.
That springy suspension does rear its head when you try to do anything other than just sort of cruise along.
Yeah, I was surprised, especially riding them back to back. When I initially rode the Meteor 350, I felt really confident on it in the turns and stuff, but I was surprised that I was able to control it a little bit, especially considering how much firmer the suspension was. Normally when I'm in turns, I do like the firmer suspension feel because it communicates really well, but I was pretty surprised with the softer suspension and that I liked it on the Meteor, but it was just one of those things.
I'm just going to get straight into it. We saw a little bit of debate in the comments on whether the Meteor is a cruiser or a standard motorcycle. It's got a dropped seat, it's got a passenger backrest, windshield, That's a cruiser. So the Enfield, you've got a tubular frame, you've got air-cooled engine, mag wheels, that big Royal Enfield badge on the tank looks amazing.
Yep.
The fit and finish on this bike is surprisingly really nice for a bike that's $45.99. This is a great looking motorcycle that has a lot of functional accessories.
Yeah, a lot of added stuff. And with the Rebel 300, you have to go into the accessories catalog or the aftermarket. And, and it's at $4,899 with ABS, like the top model.
And not to mention, looking at this Enfield, you have chrome gas cap, your chrome pipes. You know, there's really a lot of nice finishes on this bike. Whereas on the Rebel, you see, you know, plastic covers, matte black, everything is just blacked out.
Yeah.
So you don't draw a lot of attention to it.
Yeah.
Which, you know, you get, yes, they're functional components, but historically the cruiser segment is all about style.
Customizing.
And yeah, the Meteor really carries that style, in my opinion, much better than the Rebel does.
Yeah.
And what we see here with the two-tone with that badge is the most expensive option at $45.99.
But with the base
Rebel
model, you get the navigation still, you get the back seats. So this Supernova trim has a little bit of added value to it, but like, man, you get a lot for that $4,599 price tag.
Yeah. We've noticed there's quite a lot of big differences between these motorcycles. One of the biggest that I noticed, and one of the biggest shortcomings on that Enfield, is the braking. We're very used to a full lever squeeze. You're not expecting that same 1 and 2 finger, the delicate application that you get with sport bikes.
Yeah.
But you're also not expecting to have to just jam your whole hand to get a stopping reaction from that front tire, which unfortunately you really do have to do with that bike. It takes a lot to get it to do what you're asking of it.
Yeah, and honestly, I even had to look down at my foot to see if I was touching that lever too. So yeah, it's just one of those things, especially when you ride them back to back, you notice you could stop a whole lot easier with the Rebel 300.
Yeah, and I mean, that comes back to the nearly 50-pound weight difference as well, but the Nissan caliper on the Rebel just performs much better. You have better feel, better stopping power. It just works as expected, whereas the Meteor, I found myself a couple times not having as much brake as I wanted.
Yeah. Both models do have ABS. ABS is standard across all trims for this one, and it is an option on the Rebel. So you do get that safety feature, which is nice for both, especially for beginners. So,
and it's an option that costs an extra, what, $300?
It's like $300. Yeah. Let's talk about ergos too. For the Meteor 350, we have a very relaxed riding position.
Can we address that we are 6'4" and 6 foot comparing tiny cruiser motorcycles? So we are used to being big for bikes, and we're both used to riding cruisers a lot, but we are still larger than the average size of the intended ergonomics on these things. Moving past it. Ergos.
So ergos, with the Meteor, you have more of a relaxed position, where with the Rebel 300, my legs are kind of tight and the seat is low, the arms are outstretched.
Yeah, you've got more of a stretch to the bars, your feet are a little bit higher up, you've got a little bit more pullback here, you've obviously got some wind protection here, which is nice. The Rebel definitely feels like it's more aggressive ergonomics. Feet are a little bit higher. The seat is harder. After a full day of riding. My butt was definitely happier in the Meteor than it was on the Rebel.
Yeah, I was on this all day and I was comfortable, and then I switched to that. And after an hour and a half of riding or so, I was like, oh, that one's that firm seat.
It's thin, which does lend itself to a nice looking silhouette, but after a full day of riding, it'll catch up with you.
For sure.
Ergonomics on the Enfield, again, we're going back to it not really feeling like a super small bike. On the Enfield, it feels pretty standard, pretty normal, just normal, good cruiser ergos. The floorboards are weird to me.
They're chunky and kind of awkward.
I wish it was a normal peg. Not this like, it's like the size of a deck of cards. All right. But that just seems a little weird. But really, the challenge I found with the ergonomics on the Rebel were highway miles, because my legs are up and you're pushed up, and I was just pulling myself onto the bars the whole time. So it's not necessarily the most relaxed highway cruising ergonomic
Yeah,
position.
where this one, you have, like you said, you have that windscreen, you have the comfortable riding position, you're just cruising down the freeway.
You can put your feet anywhere on those huge floorboards.
Yeah. And another thing about the floorboard was I noticed it's chunky, obviously, but to get my toe under that shift lever, I adjusted it. It has a heel toe shifter.
Sure.
And I was curious to see, like, if I adjusted it, would I be able to get my toe better under there? And yes, it did, but that also sacrificed me not even being able to use the heel shifter portion, really, because it's so far back.
You have to make a choice for sure.
It's definitely
for
an
me,
user choice.
I've got big old boots, and so I'd rather be able to shift like I'm used to, get it into that front shifter, and just pretend that the heel shifter doesn't exist. But again, you know, that's one accessory that you just no longer get to use because of the design.
Exactly. Yeah, so with the Meteor 350, you got the styling is there, that's a positive. You have the comfort factor, but when it comes to suspension, the softer feel, the lack of brake feel, and the more mellow engine, that's where the Rebel 300 really takes the cake. It has that higher revving engine, firmer suspension, and the better feel at the brakes. It just takes it, and that's why it's won, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. The engine character, it just revs up more quickly, revs a lot higher. Where we're riding in Southern California, you really do need that performance, and I found myself wanting while riding the Royal Enfield several times. This just feels like a more complete package everywhere that we brought it and everywhere that we were riding the bikes. So I'd say the Rebel is the clear winner here.
I agree. And that's a wrap for this comparison, with the 2021 Honda Rebel 300 ABS being the clear winner. And if you liked what you saw, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.